What's going on, guys? Welcome to another edition of Analytically Correct. Marty with Jeff back again. It's becoming more regular. Good to have Jeff again. And then Stretch producing, obviously. We're all from home. We're going to start this week talking about Colin Kaepernick kneeling and how everyone feels about it. Feel free to comment any comments on this or anything that's been going on this week as far as politics. Who you like for president and why. Put all that stuff in the comments. I'm obviously kidding. We're not going to talk about any of that stuff at all. I'm sure you can find plenty of places that are talking about all that stuff. We're going to do a couple of different things. We're going to do some fantasy football. Me and Jeff are going to go back and forth and kind of do a top 10 or kind of like a little draft to each get 5 players, just a little fantasy football preview. We're going to do some predictions for awards that I reserve the right to change my mind on 5 times before the season starts. So we're going to do a couple of those awards and then playoff picks, Super Bowl picks, stuff like that. So that's and the NBA, yeah, too. Okay, so we actually got a lot of stuff going on. We're going to do a little bit about the NBA restarting and then some different formats that I've heard. And then as far as seeding and maybe kind of some predictions for restarting, who we think is going to win and everything like that. So I guess to start, I'll give you the first pick if you want for the fantasy draft, the little mini draft we're going to do here. If you want to take the first pick, whoever you're going to take, and then maybe talk a little bit about why.
I think most years there's a player that stands out, and based on his production last year, there's no reason to not go with Christian McCaffrey as the overall number 1 pick. Certainly, if you're in a half-point PPR standard, I mean, it pretty much across the board. Saquon would be the other option only because of the way he finished. But I think just overall throughout the season, Christian McCaffrey is such a dynamic player receiving and rushing. He's obviously going to be the focal point in a new offense with an offensive-minded coach. I would guess that he is overwhelmingly the number 1 player in all of fantasy to start the season.
Yeah, I would have probably taken McCaffrey number 1 too. Is there any concern about like workload? You came in a little bit heavier last year, but I mean it was all muscle. I'm not saying it as a bad thing. He came in and bulked up a little bit to I think help him handle the load and everything like that. And I think the only concern you would have taking him number 1 is maybe after having such a heavy load the last couple of years. And like I said before all this, I agree with you. But just to make a case for the other side in the interest of seeing both sides, is there any? I mean, you probably take him number 1. Any of the guys who you're going to take number 1 will have that issue with having such a huge load as far as carries and all that kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
he's like 70% of the entire offense.
Yeah, I mean, running backs, especially the high volume ones, you're always going to be concerned because they're going to get hit. Half of the plays that they get, as many times as they get the ball. But I mean, sheer just volume and productivity and explosiveness. I mean, he just got it all. And as much as I like, some of the other players, I mean, he just seems like the obvious choices here.
Is he kept in the in our 16-team league that we do?
Oh, undoubtedly he will be. Yes.
Probably.
This will be the last year he kept, but yes.
Yeah, that's the funny thing going through this draft. It's like looking at all the possibilities, and then when you get to our league, it's a 16-team keeper league. So starting right off the bat, like the first overall pick last year, I mean, we saw who's the running back? Somebody took one of the Denver guys really high. I think it was like
Saquon ended up being the first pick in our draft only because of the fact that I threw him back to keep Mahomes.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I think at number 2, I would go with Zeke Elliott. Other than the fact that he's going to have the carries, he's going to have the receptions and everything like that. And by the way, we're doing. We can consider like half-point PPR, right? I know I'm not a big fan of PPR, but I know a lot of people like PPR. But instead of doing no PPR or 1 full point, we'll just go with half point, just so it minimizes the value. It's not a big deal for the top 10 anyways. But I would go with Zeke over some of the other some of the other running backs, one guy in particular, is just the fact that he's on a much better team. I think the Cowboys are going to be ahead a lot this year. So, I mean, that's more carries right there for you. That's kind of you can go any number of different directions, but I think at number 2, I would take a guy who their team's going to be ahead for a long time for a lot of the games.
Yeah, I think if there's an argument to be made against Zeke, all your points are pretty good. It's the amount of weapons that are on that team.
Right.
Like they're certainly going to throw the ball a good amount. You have a really, really good backup running back who is explosive in his own right, and Tony Pollard, and he's going to be mixed in the offense on some level. So I would be interested to see just how the distribution is for the Cowboys, because I don't know that they're the same Cowboys from 3 years ago where you just penciled Zeke in 25 touches a game. It may be the case again, but I don't know that it will be.
Yeah, the offensive line is not, I think, going to be as good as it was in previous years with some of the injuries they've had and guys leaving. But I mean, I was in between. You're probably going to take who I was also thinking about with the next pick, and I just think if all things are equal, I'll take the guy who's going to be on a team that's leading a lot more of the time. But you can go ahead with the third pick.
Yeah, I mean, it's Saquon Barkley. So yeah, and I get your point. Like I don't think there's a obvious choice. Again, some of it is if you're in a half point, full point PPR, I think Saquon is probably edges out Zeke just because he's going to get more receptions. But I think you can make the argument just pure production wise for either one of them. But Saquon, if he's healthy, I mean, last year was, it just didn't start off well. He gets injured, and then he explodes the end of the year, like he was, the previous year. And I would assume new coaches. I think they're probably going to try and protect Daniel Jones a lot. I think Zeke's going to get Saquon's going to get a ton of touches, just like he had been. If he's healthy, he's going to be in the mix for fantasy football's top running back, I think.
Yeah. I was just, like I said, all things being equal, and the Giants might be better this year. We'll see what happens with Daniel Jones. But it's just, there's some teams where, I mean, you're going to take the guys, but if all things are equal, I'll take guys on better teams that are generally going to score more points. But I think any of those 3 guys so far, if anybody took any of them number 1, we haven't gotten to the point where I'd be surprised if anyone took one of those guys number 1. Let me see. I think with the next pick, I would go, this is tough. There's like 3 guys and they're all kind of different. I think if he can stay healthy, which is always a big question mark, he could also get the number 1 scoring running back. I'll do Dalvin Cook, and I'll just roll the dice that he's going to stay healthy. But it's one of those guys when you're playing against him and you look up and all of a sudden he's got 37 points, and you're like, what the fuck? Yeah. But then the next week he could have an ankle but I think last year he was relatively healthy. I think it's only been
he got beat up towards the end of the year for sure. But I think there was a stretch where him and McCaffrey were kind of going back as the number 1 running back, fantasy wise. I mean, he had some huge games. You would assume again that the volume's going to be there. Similarly to the other 3 we mentioned, everybody can receive their 3 down backs. So you would just take injury out of all of these. I mean, I think Dalvin is going to be in the conversation for, there's top 5 to 10 depending on your format and if you're keepers and things like that. But he's another one that's going to get kept in our league. So
yeah, he's so fun to watch play too. Is one of those guys where no matter where you are on the field, he could score. He's not going to get caught from behind very much if he busts a big one or anything like that. But you go ahead with your pick.
Man, I'm gonna throw Derrick Henry in there, and I never
I knew.
feel good about saying that, only because as amazing a year as he had in playoffs he had, like, I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but chances are for me, he's the type of player that's like, it just scares me to death. Um, if you get that same player, then yeah, he's clearly a top 5 running back. I mean, there's no arguing it, but it's debatable whether he's going to be. Same coaching, offensive line is so good. I don't know. But I went back and forth with Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara, but Kamara was like kind of blah last year comparatively. Like
It's just one of those too with a lot of weapons on the team as well. I mean, who's the other? Who else is in New Orleans that took over some of his carries last year too? Was it? There was somebody else last year that they got that was decent that took away some of his carries.
What's his face that used to play for the Saints? Took the place of Mark Ingram. It was his face. He went to UTF, didn't he?
I'm not sure, but either way, with the Derrick Henry, the Derrick Henry thing, he's still fun to watch, and I think if you could add anything that would be different from last season, I think he wound up not getting paid, right? They paid Tan, not him, and that was the big argument that everybody was having. Which if he could even possibly run any harder, I mean they're probably going to run him into the ground and then wind up not paying him. So you could argue that he's going to get.
You can franchise him till the wheels fall off, technically.
Or you could argue that he's going to have even a bigger workload if that's possible. Worry a little bit about, since he's so big, like I said, the getting caught from behind, but I mean, it's going to be tough to take him down anyways. But I like that pick. He's definitely going to go in the top 10 and top 5 for running backs. And if you get the guy that from that run that he had, I think it was in one of the fantasy playoffs, and James had him against you. And he wasn't even. We were all like celebrating with James at work or watching the game, and he's scoring every time. And it was nothing against you, but it's just like you see one of those fantasy performances that you'll always like remember, like the old Doug Martin performances and stuff like that. And they just start running off like 3 touchdowns, and you realize early.
It was also against me. Let's not kid yourselves. Like everybody.
No, I mean that probably had something to do with it, but then you still wound up winning that game, which was insane. Like, in a 16-team league, when you have a running back that scores like 50 points, there's no possible way you're going to lose.
No, like if I'm being honest, I didn't think I would win that week. And that was like I want to say it was the first week of the playoffs.
He said, Stretch said, "Fuck Derrick Henry."
Yeah.
I'm guessing he was against you in that game as well. I think. Let me see. Yeah, this is where it starts getting into the territory where, like, if someone takes one of these guys number 1, you're like, nah, it's probably a Saints fan. But you have to take Kamara at this point. Looking at what other running backs are coming up after this, there's a couple that I do still really like that I think could finish top 5, especially considering like where they're going to be drafted and some of the rankings I was looking at. The Saints, I mean, they're going to be ahead a lot. They're going to score a lot of points. And I mean, he's just really awesome. Like you said, he had a down year last year. Maybe that'll be motivation for this year. A lot of people are picking the Saints for the Super Bowl. It's kind of like a trendy pick. So I mean, you're going to have to score a lot of points. You're going to be ahead a lot. And this is where he starts getting to the guys where it's not necessarily, he could be a 3 down back, but they don't always use him like that. So I mean, you're not really wanting guys you're going to pick in the first round that are going to be coming off the field at any point. Yeah. But I mean, he's definitely got the talent, and they're going to be on a team that's going to win a lot of games. So I would take Kamara at that point.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And I was back and forth with Henry and Kamara too. I think I probably would have gone with Henry as well.
This is another kind of back and forth, but I mean, especially PPR, Michael Thomas has to be, top wide receiver, certainly top 2, especially in a PPR. I don't think there's any debating that. The amount of receptions alone, if you're in a full point PPR, it's not even close. In standard, it gets closer between him and like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. But I mean, Michael Thomas. I mean, he's just going to be there, right? Like he's a he's just a nice, safe pick again outside of injuries, man. Like you can't you haven't been able to argue his production since he got in the league. He's somebody you slot into your wide receiver position outside of buys and not even worry about it.
The only thing you can really hold against him is that he went to Ohio State. But I mean, other than that, yeah, he's been pretty good so far.
Yeah.
But this is like the interesting point, I think, in every draft where it's like, do I take one of the best receivers, like by far, that's going to be in fantasy, or do I start going to running backs? Like, I was super surprised to see how high like Joe Mixon was ranked in a lot of the rankings I looked at, and it's like
I was surprised too. Joe Mixon is Derrick Henry prior to last year to me. Till he proves something otherwise, I have no interest in him. I would sooner take DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones.
Yeah, he just feels like super average,
Yeah,
and he's on the Bengals.
There's a number of Josh Jacobs I would take before him.
Yeah, we'll get to him later, but I had him last year, and I had him in like all 4 leagues or all 5 leagues or something like that. Yeah. I think except in the 16-team league that we do, and that was just because in that league, like it's really interesting in that league to see how some of these running backs, because they're so scarce, start to go. Like you'll see guys like Kenyon Drake going super high ahead of like some really good receivers, and it's like, well,
he's another one that scares me, and somebody's either gonna hit a home run with him or they're gonna fall on their face with a really high pick. I tend to stay away from guys like Kenyon Drake. Nick Chubb even scares me a little bit this year, and it's only because you have other running backs there. You know what I mean? Like, you have to use Kareem Hunt, right? Like you have to. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I don't know. We'll go to my pick now. Then it's going to be Nick Chubb, another guy who I had in a bunch of different leagues. I always wind up like this, which is probably got to learn to diversify my bonds. But I always end up with like a lot of the same guys in like 4 or 5 different leagues, and it was working out. I think he was like the top running back for a while as far as yards went. And I think the touchdowns, which are kind of random in fantasy, when you look year to year, you're better off looking at yards than touchdowns because random situations, whether they're on the 1-yard line, and they thing that everybody hates when they do like a quarterback sneak instead of giving it to your running back, and it's like he got you all the way down there.
Yeah.
But he was awesome last year. I guess the only reason that he would go lower is because there's another running back there.
It's not just another running back. I mean, it's Kareem Hunt. Like let's
right, but I mean, he could also
be honest about it.
He could also be suspended at any point too. So you can't really predict those things, but you also it wouldn't scare me as much. If he hits like 15 touches, especially ahead of like guys we were talking about. Like I'm not taking Joe Mixon over him. I'm not taking Aaron Jones is an interesting one.
Yeah.
But with everything going on with the Packers, I might be more apt to stay away from some of those guys this year, just because the dysfunction.
I'm definitely taking an Aaron Jones over Joe Mixon.
Right. Yeah. Joe Mixon's just the example I keep using. He's just, when you picture like average running back in the NFL, it's just Joe Mixon's picture comes up. Mm-hmm. And I mean, no disrespect to him, but it's just not when that's going to be your first pick in the first round.
Right. Like if you told me Joe Mixon's my like second running back, okay, maybe in a large, 14 team, 16 team league, okay. I can
right. That. Yeah. So I would go with Nick Chubb, and then you can go ahead.
Again, the toss-up between probably 3 wide receivers here for me: Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins.
Even with Jordan Love throwing in the ball?
Especially with Jordan, no. No, I think, Tyreek, it's the other weapons. Like the other 2 are definitely going to be a focal point of their offenses for sure. And Tyreek is, but there's so many mouths to feed, and yet his production is still off the charts. He was hurt last year, and he still was pretty damn good. um, assuming a 16 team or 16 game season from him. That
You want as many guys like that too on your team, where
yeah,
it's like if you're looking at somebody playing against you and they have Tyreek Hill, you're like, please don't let this be the 35-point game. Like as many players you can get on your team that are going to make the person you're playing be like, oh fuck, not this.
right. And you know what? There's always been those players that had explosive games, and then they'd have Julio's kind of an example of this, where he has some explosive games, and then he has some games where he gets you like 4 points, right? Like Tyreek seemed to move away from that by and large. Even when Mahomes went down, he was having some really solid games where he's getting you, you know, a touchdown, 100 yards, things like that, and then he has some random rushes in there. So like his floor isn't is pretty high to me, and so Dondre in that offense, you gotta like it. But I don't know. There's something about Tyreek Hill, just his explosiveness in that offense that he's gonna get the ball would be kind of edge out Devontae and DeAndre Hopkins to me.
Yeah, when your average reception is like 30 yards downfield, you don't need that many of them to start racking up points. Mm-hmm. I guess,
and it's definitely different if you're in a PPR, right? So he probably takes a back seat to those two in PPR format.
Well, the thing that I would put him ahead of Hopkins for is the offense. I think is going to be good in Arizona, but I mean, you have the better coaching, but then Kyler Murray, as much as I do like him, I think I got in on him like 1 year too early in fantasy. I think he's going to be a higher pick this year, and I think he's going to be really good. I was kind of all in on him last year for like waiting and then taking him, and he was all right. But the continuity of Tyreek Hill still being in the same offense the entire time, and you have Patrick Mahomes, and you have the fastest receiver in the league, arguably, and a guy who may be the only player in the league that could overthrow him. That's a pretty good combination.
Kansas City can't really double anybody on that team, and now they just added a dynamic running back, and so you assume, not necessarily thinking you're going to are you getting Kareem Hunt? If you're getting anywhere close to even rookie Kareem Hunt production, that offense, I don't even know what you do with it. Like, good luck.
And then you're talking about the rookie running back that they got?
Yeah. Edwards-Helaire, yeah.
The fun game you get to play if you have Tyreek Hill, where it's like a guessing game. It's like a 60-yard bomb downfield, and you're like, is that my short receiver that caught that, or is that Demarcus Robinson or one of the other guys?
Yeah.
You get to have that fun, like 10 seconds of being nervous if it was like somebody else. I played that a lot last year, but it was not with Tyreek Hill. It was with the other guys. I was like, is that my other?
I had before Kareem Hunt got suspended, if you recall, I had Patrick Mahomes' rookie year, and I was just ripping up the league, and I had Kareem Hunt that I kept from the previous year, who was continuing to do his things, and then I had Saquon as a rookie. And one of the best things about that situation was, and a lot of people double up on players in offenses, like dynamic offenses, but when you had Kansas City and you knew if it was a passing touchdown, I was getting points, and if it was rushing, I was getting points. And every once in a while, I got receiving because he threw to Kareem Hunt. It was fantastic. Almost like there was rarely a score that year up until the time he got suspended where I didn't get some elements of Kansas City's touchdown. It was
loading up on like guys from teams like that, whether it's like the Saints or the Chiefs or anything like that, especially if you have the quarterback receiver combo.
Yeah.
And it's like boom bust, but most of the time with those guys. So for my last pick, we could both do one more. Or you got the first pick, so I guess this will be the last pick.
Yeah.
We got a lot of other stuff that I wanted to get to. I'm going to do San Francisco's defense and special teams.
No, you're not.
Yes. No, I'm going to go with there always has to be one of those guys in the draft, though. Why are you taking the Bears defense in the 5th round?
Yeah.
No, I would go with Josh Jacobs, one of the guys I had on like 4 or 5 teams last year. He's the only thing against it is the Raiders as a whole. You might not want to have guys on a team like that. He had a little bit.
I like the pick. He's a good player. He produced, and they didn't have a ton of other options. They had a really good emerging tight end. You had an receiver that was maybe wide receiver 3 on some teams. And they added a lot of weapons, and so
helps not to trade all your best players if you're
yeah. Well, that's true too, but I think the Raiders will be a better offense overall, which means more opportunities for Jacobs.
The only thing that I would maybe make the case against him is, sometimes you have that sophomore slump as far as running backs go. He did have a big load last year. It's a lot different than when you're playing in college, as many touches and the hits that you're taking and everything like that. But yeah, that's kind of, I think, once we get past this, we start getting into like debates of when do you take tight ends, quarterbacks, and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be good for now. We can keep with the NFL, and we're going to do a couple of our prognostications, picks. Who do you have for MVP this year?
Patrick Mahomes. Going out on a limb. Just throwing it out there, I know it's crazy talk, but yeah.
So how do we make this an interesting discussion other than both of us just saying Patrick Mahomes? Can you make the case against him? If you want to bet, I would go maybe with Lamar Jackson. He's getting pretty decent odds.
Yeah. Lamar Jackson, yeah. If somehow any one of, I think Dak is a dark horse candidate because of the weapons. I think, I don't know.
You can't win MVP if you're not even a franchise quarterback, right? It's not something you can do. From everything I've been hearing, I don't want to get into it. We've talked maybe more on this podcast about the Cowboys and Dak Prescott and all that kind of stuff. But Dak Prescott, he's going to have the weapons to do it and stuff like that, and he's going to have no excuses after this year.
If you asked me to pick somebody that wasn't just obvious, which we didn't, I'd say Dak, or, I think McCaffrey could be in the conversation if somehow.
I don't think it's ever going to be a running back.
I think just because he receives and his production is off the charts. But I'm trying to think outside the box.
No, I know. It's tough to have a better season and do more for your team than he did last year. And if you're not gonna people were talking about it then, they're like, no, it's never gonna be a running back again. I don't think, unless there's some kind of we've seen some really good seasons recently that could have had consideration for it. I think you can make a case for Drew Brees. I don't think he's ever won it before, so it is a media award. So you could have guys that it's kind of like maybe he should have got one in the past, but he was playing with Brady and Peyton Manning in their prime, so he never kind of got there. It's kind of like the Revenant Oscar for DiCaprio, where he should have won it probably for Wolf of Wall Street, and then they gave him a makeup one. So you can make it for Drew Brees. They're going to be good. I'm trying to think if there's any way Tom Brady could win it with the weapons that he's going to have, but I think the short answer is Patrick Mahomes. So we don't need to stay on it too long. Yeah. Did you end up doing a defensive player of the year?
Yeah.
Who'd you get for that?
I put Stephon Gilmore again because if the Patriots are going to be competitive, you would assume it's going to be about their defense. And if they make the playoffs after Brady's left, it's going to be about their defense, in my opinion. And if he has the same year he had last year, anywhere close, it's hard to make a case against that guy, where he just locks people down.
It's interesting too. I didn't do a coach of the year or anything like that, but this is one of those years, and the award for coach of the year in most sports is all about what were your expectations and by how much did you exceed them. So I think even if the Patriots go 9 or 10 wins and make it to the playoffs, Belichick will wind up getting coach of the year or something like that, even if it should have been somebody else. But
he'll be in the conversation, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think the Gilmore pick is good. All the reasons you gave with him being the anchor on that defense and trying to shut people down and everything. I went with Nick Bosa. I think a lot of times it's a guy on the defensive line that's impacting every play. I was kind of surprised when Gilmore won it, not because I thought that he shouldn't, but it's not like as sexy. Sacks are much more of a sexy stat than like nobody threw the ball at me all year.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty decent history in the NFL, though, of defensive backs and corners winning Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
It goes back to the Dion, Darrelle Revis thing, where you can just have that guy that literally shuts down, especially this day and age, even more so than when those two played, is it's such a pass-heavy league. You have so many dynamic wide receivers that if you can shut down their number one option, that's huge for the defense. Nick Bosa is an obviously great choice. I mean, the guy's a freak.
Yeah, another Ohio State guy, unfortunately, but that just shows how good I think he is, that I can overcome my biases and pick him. But he's such a game wrecker. And he's going to be on a good defense, which I think helps.
Well, I think you can make an argument for his brother too if he stays healthy. That if Kansas City's defense, or not Kansas City's, the Chargers defense takes a leap. Let's go with like some not so obvious choices. To me, his brother would be one, and then Derwin James, if he plays a whole season.
Yeah, that guy.
His ability to just make plays all over the field. If the Chargers defense raises up to a top 5-ish, 10-ish defense, I think those two are going to be a big, big part of it. And I think that will, if you want some dark, maybe a little bit further down the list, guys, those two would be names I would think in the conversation.
If we're being honest too, it probably should just be Aaron Donald every year.
And then there's Aaron Donald, right? I mean, right. He's going to be in that conversation as well.
If we're talking about like who is actually the best defensive player of the year, I mean, you could throw Khalil Mack out there too. But just from what he's done so far, that's why I kind of went with Bosa. But you could talk me into any number of guys. I didn't really do offensive player of the year because that's pretty much what MVP has become. It's the same kind of thing where defensive player is not going to – there was years when J.J. Watt probably could have won MVP, and if it's not going to happen then they're just telling us it's not going to happen. But I did offensive rookie of the year. Did you do that?
Yeah.
Who did you get for that?
It was a toss-up, and this is merely about, just like it is for me with fantasy and opportunity, it's really a toss-up. I put between Jerry Jeudy and Cam Akers because I think both will be focal points. Did Akers
go to the Eagles?
Huh?
Did Akers go to the Eagles? Where did he go?
To the Rams.
To the Rams, okay. Yeah, okay.
So Jeudy, you would assume is going to be the number one wide receiver in Denver. Depending on how well Locke plays, is going to determine a lot as far as his ability to win that award. But in a way, I'm a little bit of a homer thing, but Cam is no, but in reality, he's going to get his opportunities. I would have told you Edwards-Helaire.
I almost picked him.
Except for the fact that I think they are going to sprinkle in other guys. But if you told me he gets anywhere close to rookie Kareem Hunt production, then there's your winner.
I almost picked him as well, just for the same kind of opportunity thing that you were talking about. And I almost went with Jeudy, but then the thing with Drew Lock, and I feel like they're more going in a run-heavy direction, especially with him being his first full year as a starter. And it is tough for – I'd have to look it up. Maybe I'm saying something stupid, but it seems like receivers more so in their second or third season is like the coming out season. Obviously, we're picking rookie of the year. I understand that. But I would be more likely to pick maybe a running back, but I didn't. And it's crazy with Cam Akers. Why? Because I remember we were in your office when he signed with Florida State, and I didn't hear from him for like 3 years. So why did he not have a better career at Florida State, or he did?
No, he had a really good career. That's what people don't realize. Behind one of the worst offensive lines in the country.
It's just because they weren't as good that he wasn't as like nationally.
No, Dalvin was well known because we were still decent. Dalvin, we played in major bowls, the Orange Bowl, as a Michigan fan, he torched.
I was there.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great back, but anybody who's had to endure FSU's past couple seasons would tell you Cam Akers, without question, was the best player, and he did it behind a horrific offensive line, a horrific coaching staff. It just didn't make sense, and he was still uber productive. Like, that's the thing. He was receiving, he was rushing. His production was very, very good. And then you get to the combine, he tests well pretty much in every aspect. Cam got unfortunately wrapped up in the whirlwind that was FSU's worst 2 seasons in 40 years.
Yeah, that was some tough times.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have a losing season until 2 years ago in 40 years. So, but no, I mean, if you go look at his actual production and then go look at Pro Football Focus, does college ratings too, right? And you look at where FSU's offensive line ratings were. It is, I think they're one of the top 5 worst offensive lines for 2 years in a row. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
We have a terrible quarterback the past 2 years in Blackman. But to the point about this, Cam is going to get opportunities in a pretty good offense. And if you look at just what that position has done for the Rams, specifically Todd Gurley, but even when the other guys played, you're getting production. And if he ends up being the main back for the Rams, he's absolutely going to be in the conversation for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, it's funny because Kyle Shanahan is kind of like the hot new thing, and everybody just, especially after that Super Bowl, has been down on McVay. But, I mean, we've seen what he can do with a good running back, and he can scheme. I mean, Todd Gurley had like MVP caliber seasons for the time that he was healthy there. So
right, and Todd Gurley wasn't at all known to even be a decent, or wasn't thought of to be even a decent receiving option out of the backfield, and they made him into an adequate one. Cam is infinitely better on paper receiving the ball than he was. He's not maybe as explosive, but I think Cam Akers is going to be in the conversation, especially if he takes that leap back for the Rams.
Yeah, I went with after all that talk that I said I would go with the running back. I actually went with Brandon Ayuk, who San Francisco drafted in the first round. Another similar thing that you were saying about like situation. I don't think he's the best receiver in the draft, but I don't think that anybody went to a better situation than him. Like, I mean, Jerry Jeudy might have more opportunity, but
I mean, Ruggs, depending on how they use him, if they use him in a Tyreek Hill kind of way in Las Vegas, I think Ruggs can be that guy. If they use him in the slot, they have him, they pitch him the ball, they do end rounds, they do all these things to get him the ball. I think if he's utilized in the way that Tyreek Hill is utilized, then I think he's also in a very good situation.
That's kind of why I didn't go with him, is because of where he went, and I'm not trusting John Gruden to scheme up the way that Andy Reid does for Tyreek Hill, all these different kind of. But if he is used the right way, I agree. Like I said, I don't think that Ayuk is the best receiver, or maybe even top 3 of the receivers that were drafted, but when you don't have to be the number 1 option, you might be taking away some opportunities, but the opportunities you do get, he's going to scheme you wide open. Yeah. And I think in that offense, and with that scheme and everything like that, a little bit of an out there pick, I guess. He's a first-round receiver, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just can see him being wide open all over the field and everything like that. And if Garoppolo can get it to him,
well, there's an if.
I'm more high on Garoppolo than other people. I mean, he was 6 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes, and I know people will say that the defense won them all the games and did all this, but I have confidence. I mean, I'm not saying he's all like top 5 or anything like that, but I think he gets shit on a lot more than he should. I mean, one of the years he was hurt, and then last year they went to the Super Bowl, so he's done pretty well so far. But people just like to point out defense and say that it was none of him doing anything, and it doesn't help that he had the one throw where I think it was the overthrow that probably could have won him the game, but they were 6 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl, so I think he's pretty decent.
Yeah.
Defensive rookie of the year, did you do?
Chase Young.
The only thing about that is they're going to be down in so many games that he's not going to get as – I mean, he's awesome. I think he's by far the best player in the draft, and Burrow went number 1 because, like we were talking about the quarterback market, you pay quarterbacks and you pick quarterbacks number 1. There's been years when the best player in the draft isn't taken number 1, and you look back 5 years later and you see that it's a bunch of shitty quarterbacks. Not that Joe Burrow is that, but I think Chase Young – if all things are equal, is a better player than Joe Burrow even.
Yeah, no, it's a completely reasonable and fair argument to be, that if teams are just running the ball because they're up on the Redskins. I mean, we'll see.
And since he's like the only good player on that defense, pretty much, I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple of like decent people.
No, like their defensive line was beat up last year. The Redskins' defensive front isn't typically terrible, but
people are going to be scheming to not go near him. So, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Those are a couple of reasons I didn't pick him because Washington is so terrible. But I mean, he could be the bright spot and he could easily win it. I kind of cheated. I picked 2 guys, but I guess if I had to pick one, I would pick Isaiah Simmons because I think the speed of that offense and everything like that is going to kind of speed up the rate of play and everything like that. He was my favorite player in the draft. I wanted the Lions to get him really bad. But
he's the more linebacker focused version of Derwin James, right? These guys that you can
do
just
everything
everywhere. Yeah.
But if I didn't pick him, I have another one who I think just went. It's these teams that do the same thing every year in the draft. Like as soon as they draft a guy, you're like, how is he still there? It's in the perfect situation. Was Patrick Queen for Baltimore?
Yeah.
Another one of those like linebacker type guys who's going to be impacting a lot of different plays. And you saw it with Devin Bush, who went probably lower than he should have in the other draft. And you just go to situations like Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and it seems like guys are just really good right away.
Yeah.
So either one of those guys. But yeah, I would not be surprised if Chase Young won it. So who'd you have? Do you want to do first the playoff teams that you had? I did winner of each division and then 2 wild card teams.
That's how I did. That's what I did too.
And then we can say maybe the Super Bowl after that.
Yeah, go ahead. You can do yours.
For AFC East, I had Buffalo. Nobody's ever going to get rich betting against New England, but I think I don't know.
Why don't go? Let's go through each one and see if there's a difference. I had Buffalo too. It's fine.
Okay. I had Baltimore. I think what is that? The AFC North. I picked Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, everything. The only thing that's worrying me about Baltimore is kind of the league. Not to say that what they're doing is the Wildcat, but the league kind of catching up. Sometimes it takes defenses a year or 2 to catch up. Yeah. And if anybody can stay ahead of that, it's Lamar Jackson. He's awesome, and the team is awesome too. They had a good draft. They had a good free agency like they always do. I had Baltimore for that one. Pittsburgh, I'm not really sold on Ben Roethlisberger, and then the Browns. I'm obviously not sold on the Browns. I kind of bought into the hype a little bit last year. I don't remember if I picked them to win the division or not, but I think at one point I might have said Baker Mayfield could be an MVP candidate. So I'm not going to be tricked on the Browns. And then obviously Cincinnati is Cincinnati, so they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You had Baltimore also?
Yes.
I had Indianapolis. I think that's the AFC South, even though they're in the middle of the country. You had Indy too?
Yeah. I'm still a little. I'm a Phillip Rivers fan, especially from a fantasy standpoint. Like in
Stretch made a face. I think it was at the Phillip Rivers thing.
Yeah, he's like a nice late round pick that you could, most years you could rely on him to get you.
I like him too. You don't have to talk me into it. I don't understand.
Now here's my point. Phillip Rivers at this stage in the game, I'm not like the Chargers had weapons last year, and he looked really bad at times. And I don't think they have the weapons that I think overall they are a really good team, the Colts. Strong offensive line, solid defense, good running game now. They got, at least one playmaker in the wide receiver position. I just don't know about the Phillip Rivers thing. I do also have the Colts because of the team as a whole.
So not to get ahead of into the wild card teams, but did you have Houston in the wild card?
No.
So why do you not also like Houston? Like I can't use my words right now, but why do you also not like Houston?
Well, because the guy making the calls, O'Brien's he's a reasonably okay coach.
The playoffs pretty much every year, but for the same
I understand,
reason.
but you just traded a top 3 wide receiver for some donuts, and I understand they got some receivers and they have some, if if a couple of them actually stay healthy for the first time in their career, they might do something, but
I think donuts have a better chance of being healthy than what's his name does. Who is the running back that they got? David Johnson. David Johnson.
Thank you.
Donuts are more healthy than David
Johnson, who just 2 years ago would have been argument for the #1 fantasy running back.
Yeah, and there's your argument for not paying Derrick Henry right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like you said. That's the same exact way I would describe him, as like perfectly adequate and reasonably okay as a coach. But I think if you had Deshaun Watson for this long, just making it to the playoffs and losing in that worst playoff game that they always put on Thursday after or Saturday afternoon every year, and you're in that game for a reason. So for me, it's more of an indictment that you haven't won more with Deshaun Watson to this point than just getting to the playoffs. And that was with DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
And then they also make the trade for the left tackle from the Dolphins, and then they're going to have to wind up paying him. It's just, I think the GM part of it is more worrying to me than the coaching part of it. You can be, and that was the worst thing for him, was actually to get that power, because that's going to get him fired faster than being a bad coach is being a bad GM.
Yeah, and you know what? If Will Fuller is, like I said, if Will Fuller, you're going to get, would they sign Randall Cobb? Okay, sure. But it just doesn't make any sense. If David Johnson is, like I don't know, like none of it seems to make any real sense, and maybe it'll end up working out, and he'll look like a genius somehow. I have to believe it to see it, or see it to believe it, and I don't. But I am picking the Colts only because I think the team, the coaching is better. The whole team around Phillip Rivers is better. They have a really good offensive line, arguably top 2 to 3.
It seems more stable.
Yeah.
Of a franchise. And when you're pointing about the offensive line, I'm a weirdo, and that's some of my favorite players to watch. Like, instead of just watching the ball, I'll watch offensive linemen. For a while, it was Tyron Smith was my favorite player to watch, just for how he destroyed people. And just see defensive backs just crumbling to the ground when he was coming in. Rightfully so. He looks like that monster from 300. So, but to the Colts point, Quentin Nelson is one of my favorite guys to watch, and a guy who once they take him as a high draft pick, and it's like, yeah, that's going to work right away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to get into that a little bit with why neither of us have Houston even making the playoffs, and you have Deshaun Watson, who has to be like atop everybody's list of guy you feel worst for right now. He's traded away one of the best receivers in football.
Yeah.
But for I forgot. I think it's AFC West. I'll just call it Kansas City's division. I have Kansas City winning Kansas City's division,
Yeah.
which it's going to be for the foreseeable future, I think.
Yeah, there's no reason. I don't think you need to elaborate much on that.
I mean, what's you could even say injuries could happen. He even got hurt last year, and they were okay when he was gone because Andy Reid.
Well, they had a sketchy running game the entire year. Tyreek Hill is missed what, 5 games? I want to say.
Yeah, he was hurt a lot of the year.
And Patrick Mahomes misses what, 2 or 3, right? And they still win the Super Bowl. So go figure.
Yeah, I mean the division,
and then the running game seems to have gotten better.
The division's not that strong. I mean, I did like Phillip Rivers, and I did like the Chargers. Denver, I mean, they're coming in this year with a first-year quarterback, and the Vegas Raiders, which I'm going to be getting wrong forever. The same thing. I'm never going to call them the LA Chargers. I'm just going to get that wrong forever. But the Raiders, it's just, I don't know, with John Gruden and everything like that. He used to be a really great coach, but I think, I don't know, especially with
I don't think Gruden did a bad job last year. I think with what they had, I mean, Derek Carr is Derek Carr.
It's the Bill O'Brien thing. It's like you're trading away all of your best players. Like you trade Khalil Mack, okay, whatever. You got the first round picks. Who else did they trade? Was that where Amari Cooper got traded from too? Yeah. So I mean, you're talking about guys who are going to be getting like max deals. And
I don't know. Yeah, but the Bill O'Brien thing, they traded the best. They didn't even get a first round pick for him.
Right. Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, my point more so is that Kansas City is going to win the division almost the same way the Patriots did all those years, where it's just also not a great division. It's actually probably people don't realize how not great it is.
Yeah.
But it is weird. I mean, they like Denver seems to be able to win some of the games against Kansas City. Like they always seem to split, which is my first wild card team is Denver. I know what I was just saying about Drew Lock being a first-year starting quarterback. I liked what I saw from him last year. And a lot of Broncos fans are really excited about Drew Lock, like unreasonably so, I think.
Yeah.
But I had Denver as the first wild card team. Who did you have?
I didn't put them in any particular order.
Yeah, and I don't. Not really the order.
Tell me the rest, the other 3 of yours.
Oh, fuck! I forgot. There's 3 now. Well, I had Denver and Tennessee.
Okay, so I had the Steelers, Titans, Patriots, and Chargers.
Wait, so how? What is it now?
They added, right? Am I getting this wrong? Maybe I
thought they just added 1 wild card, right?
Well, no. So because the first team, they get a bye, right? So one team gets a bye, and then they're still.
Yeah, but they only added 1 team. So now, one gets a bye, and then 2 plays whatever the new wild card team that got in is.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think I forgot to add 1 on, and I think you added too many on.
I did. All right. So I mean, I'll go with the Steelers since Ben's back, and I'll go with the Titans.
Yeah, I like the Titans. I mean, it's pretty much their running back. They're bringing back everything they did last year. Denver for the reasons I said, and I'm guessing you're picking the Steelers kind of just as an organization. They don't really miss the playoffs that often.
No, I mean they weren't terrible other than at the quarterback position last year, and I mean Ben is clearly going to be an upgrade no matter what. So they should be in contention to be in playoff contender.
You weren't on the duck train?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was. It was a very short train. It had like 1 car on it, and I was the conductor. It was just because his name was Duck, if I'm being honest with myself. I had for the NFC East, I had the Cowboys. I'm guessing you picked the Cowboys.
Yeah.
For the NFC North, I picked Green Bay because they have Aaron Rodgers and he's pretty good.
So did I.
You had the same so far?
Yep.
For the NFC South, I had New Orleans.
Yep.
And for the NFC West, I had San Francisco.
Yeah, we have the same ones.
All right, so none of those four are going to win their division, pretty much is what we're saying. We're going to get them all wrong.
No, I think there's some of them are I think easier picks than others.
Yeah, some of them I was more sure of.
The biggest ones are like if you think the Bucks are going to be that good, or if you think the Eagles are going to be better than the Cowboys.
I gave the Buccaneers one of the wild card spots.
So did I.
Other than the fact that that division always seems to be really crazy. Like if the Bucks won the division, I wouldn't be super surprised.
Yeah.
So I put them in one of the wild card spots. With the weapons that Brady is going to have, better weapons than he's had in years in New England. The defense is pretty steady. Probably, if I had to guess, right around like 15 or something like that. I mean, they're going to be all right. But I just gave New Orleans because of continuity, and I don't think you can just bring in Tom Brady and replace Jameis Winston, and then especially with not being able to practice regularly and all that kind of stuff. I know they started doing like some team activities and everything, but this year I think more than others is going to be more of the teams that have the continuity that are going to have a little bit of an advantage. So I put for the second wild card Seattle, just because they always seem to find a way. Like last year, they way overachieved, I thought. And Russell Wilson's just always going to be there. I think Pete Carroll, I'm not saying he's not a good coach because I think he is, but doesn't it seem to you like it does to me that Russell Wilson's always at his best when it's like 5 minutes left, they're down like 9 points, and he's just running around for his life and just making stuff happen. It seems like they wait until the fourth quarter when it's like panic time to kind of let him be Russell Wilson. Like, why don't they just do more of that all game? But I mean, I'm also not an NFL head coach, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pete Carroll has proven to be a really good coach, and I'm not saying you're disputing that. I think, Russell Wilson is. I wasn't always a fan, but at this point, you get to a certain point in somebody's career, and you're just like, he scared me when. I mean, I remember watching him at NC State, prior to him transferring to Wisconsin, and just scaring the Jesus out of me because you can bring the guy down. Like, it's
right.
Just crazy.
And it seems like no defensive end, and I'm not saying it's easy because obviously it's not, but it just seems to me like no defensive end has ever figured out that his move is to roll back 10 yards, and then when you're about to get him, he just rolls back out to the left and takes that. I mean,
he's got good twitch. That's what he is.
But he's. I mean, I just wonder what Andy Reid would do with the guy. Like I'm not saying, like I said, that Pete Carroll's not a good coach, but I wonder what Russell Wilson would look like if he had like Kyle Shanahan or Andy Reid or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to put Seattle in until they don't make the playoffs. I'm just going to keep on picking them to make the playoffs.
Yeah,
and I forgot. I honestly, 2 months off of sports, I forgot about the extra wild card spot. But who are your wild card teams? Did you say it already?
Yeah, I have the Seahawks and I have Tampa.
And then there's a third one now, right? I guess the Lions have a chance to make the playoffs.
The Eagles.
Yeah, I would think because you wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles won the division. I don't think. I picked the Cowboys, but if the Eagles did win the division, same kind of thing with stability with the organization and everything like that. I'd be super surprised. And then we don't have to go through the playoff matchups and everything, but who do you have winning the Super Bowl?
Chiefs, the Chiefs until that all the dynamics of that team prove me otherwise. It's just it's hard not to think they're not going to be there. And I think Baltimore is the other one that you can kind of So I can see that one happening. Those would be my two favorites.
Yeah, I had the Chiefs too, and it's just like what we just saw in Mahomes is like so different, and they have the coach. It's not like he's carrying the coach or the coach is carrying him or
They
the
essentially got stopped for 3/4 of a game and then
and,
still scored 30 points, right?
and it didn't matter. Yeah, the whole game it looks like San Francisco is going to win. And as somebody who bet San Francisco, I was like, well, this is what it looks like, how you beat Patrick Mahomes. And then he becomes Patrick Mahomes at the end, and it doesn't matter. It's tough to envision a way, other than injuries, that they're not going to continue to be there, especially kind of timed up perfectly with the Patriots breaking up and everything like that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Realistically, they should have been in the Super Bowl the year before.
Right. Yeah.
There were literally one offsides penalty or a coin flick potentially of winning that game, but just an offsides, literally an offsides that the game's over.
He could at this point have 2 Super Bowls and an MVP already, and the only reason.
And is there anybody that wouldn't have had the Chiefs over the Rams in that Super Bowl?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to score 12 points against or whatever it was, 12 points or 9. You're not going to do that. And I mean, the Patriots shouldn't have won that Super Bowl. It was all from like a mastermind of a game.
Defensive scheming, yeah.
And Andy Reid is pretty much the Bill Belichick of offense. So it would have been interesting to see the Rams match up with that.
Right. You're one boneheaded defensive offsides penalty away from two Super Bowls. So like, yeah, your argument is it's Baltimore is your only argument to me right now.
The other argument too is that we haven't seen like quite this before, but the other argument is that it's just hard to win back to back. Guys just not, I don't want to say care less, but you're not as hungry. But other than, I mean, Mahomes doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's like, all right, I want. But then you also think about guys like Marino who like get to the Super Bowl and then never get back again for the whole. You're like, oh, Marino's in the Super Bowl. He's going to win all these Super Bowls. He never gets back.
Yeah, I think there's something different in that they have so many offensive playmakers that you just kind of go, anybody, they don't have to all be on their game any particular day, right? They have to get into the playoffs. That's it. And then
you look at the other teams we picked to win the divisions as like Buffalo. That's not scaring you. Baltimore is the argument, like you said. Indy's not scaring you. Denver, Tennessee. These teams aren't scaring you to at least make it to the Super Bowl, and then from there, you have one game.
Right. The Saints and the 49ers on the other side of the ledger it seem like the obvious choices, but I don't. The Saints give if their defense rounds into form, and they get into the playoffs healthy, they've obviously been screwed as well in the playoffs and had some things not go their way. I think you can make an argument for the Saints being able to, on some level, hang with offensively with them if they got to that point.
Yeah, but we could be ready to see like a run here coming off from Mahomes, where I mean, it's gonna be pretty tough to stop. And it's almost crazy, like talking up Andy Reid as much as I do, that Alex Smith sat in front of him for as long as he did. I mean, you could theoretically have had Mahomes come in right away, and I don't think he learned how to throw the ball 80 yards down the field from Alex Smith. I'm not one of those people who thinks that if you're that talented, you necessarily need to sit, and he didn't become Mahomes because he learned from Alex Smith. Because if Alex Smith could teach him how to be Patrick Mahomes, then Alex Smith would be Patrick Mahomes.
Right. I mean, but nobody's Patrick Mahomes. You can't teach what he does. He doesn't. He kind of broke the mold in a lot of ways. You took some Aaron Rodgers and mixed him in with some
Russell Wilson a little bit.
Russell Wilson and some Ben Roethlisberger, and like you kind of created this thing. And
kind of where he does the thing that Brady does, where he doesn't always move a lot in the pocket, but he'll take that one step in the right direction that buys him the extra time. that these guys need to get open, which isn't much when you're talking
Right,
about.
and the other crazy thing about Patrick Mahomes is you saw him evolve as well. It's because of the injuries. He wasn't healthy because of his ankle there or his knee for a little bit, and then he had some ankle issues as well. And yet he won some games with his legs too, or he made key plays with his legs. He's clearly athletic enough to make some plays with that. But so he seemed to find all sorts of ways to win games. And like I said, that was by and large without the running game that they've been used to the past couple seasons.
What team would you have to put him on for you not to pick that team to win the division? If you put him on Jacksonville, would you pick them to win the division?
Jacksonville?
You kind of have, I mean, you kind of have to, right? It's not like we weren't super high on, and this is part of the division, but we weren't. It's not like we were picking Indy or Houston or any of these other teams or Tennessee.
No, I mean it's a really interesting question because I mean even if you just take the playoff teams outside of the obvious ones that you're not gonna switch him with Drew Brees necessarily, but I mean to your point, there's nobody I can think of that you're right. Like honestly, I mean maybe the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting because it has to be in a division where somebody has. I mean, that would be a tough division too because Pittsburgh and Baltimore are so steady all the time. But if you put him on pretty much any team, I'm probably. I mean.
Well, and here's the thing about the Bengals: their receivers are actually pretty good.
Yeah, anybody you put them on, the receivers automatically get that much better too. So, yeah, I don't know. It's tough. That was pretty much it as far as the NFL stuff goes. You wanted to get into the NBA a little bit, and this will be the last thing that we do here.
Yeah, I thought it was just interesting and worth a talk because more than anything, there seems to be a lot of momentum, whether it ends up being this way or not, of them just reseeding the top 16 teams right now. And so it makes a bracket format. Now, nobody knows whether they're going to do that or not. But if you assume that they were doing a bracket, it means that the matchups are really interesting and in a lot of ways favor the Lakers have a better path because in theory, if they went this way, the Lakers bracket would include the Nets, Jazz, Rockets, Raptors, Grizzlies, Nuggets, and Pacers, where Milwaukee's bracket has the Magic, Heat, Thunder, Clippers, Mavs, Celtics, 76ers. And that was what was really interesting about kind of looking at it from that standpoint. If that's the way they go, that's, I don't know, like nothing that just seems like a harder path for the Clippers. The fact that the Clippers and Milwaukee would have to play each other potentially, and that the Clippers would have to go through the Mavs, the Celtics or Sixers, Heat or Thunder, right? But the fact I guess more than anything that the Lakers would get to avoid playing the Clippers until the finals if it came to that. And that's what was really intriguing to me about this. Now, you're also not going to have any fans. You're not going to have any home court advantage. So, you're going to be playing in an empty arena in Orlando. So,
which benefits the Clippers anyways because they weren't going to have any fans anyways in that Lakers-Clippers series.
Sure. And so maybe that helps them. But I don't think anybody really knows how, if you just base it off of just talent, I don't see a scenario that the Lakers, the Jazz could give them a little trouble, but the Raptors are a sneaky good team. But again, like there's nobody. I like the Nuggets. I don't know. I just think, to me, the fact that the Clippers and the Bucks would have to play each other is a huge advantage for the Lakers.
Yeah, especially when you're if you're for well, the advantage also is that it's gotten a little bit better, but the East was not as good as the West.
The East
So
has
if you're taking
not been
away
as good as the
conferences,
West in like 25 years. So like that's
right?
been
But
the case for a
it's
while.
closer now than it has been. It's a little bit closer now than it has been. So I mean, you're taking away the advantage of the Bucks having to go through the East, which maybe they deserve an advantage anyways for having the number one overall record. One of the most they won't do this, but one of the most interesting ideas that I heard that would be cool if they did every year for the playoffs would be you're the one seed. You don't necessarily have to play the eight seed. You pick who you play, which would have like a lot of interesting if they reseeded it this year. So like Milwaukee for being the one seed, they get to pick who they play for each round. I mean, based on like out of a couple of options. You know, they don't, but each round they can pick like if they want to play the lower seed or whatever. But
But
I've
is
heard
that seriously being considered though? I
I
mean,
heard
that
Bill
sounds
Simmons said it.
interesting.
No, Bill Simmons said it, and it would be interesting for like teams that want to pick a certain team they want to play against. But
Yeah.
no, you're good. What was I saying? Yeah, I think I want Milwaukee to win. I think that would be good for the league and everything like that. I know LeBron is pushing the most to get back because he only has so many years left and everything like
I
that. And
don't
they have
I don't think Milwaukee is unreasonably I don't think it's a stretch to say they can win. My point was I thought their path was a little bit tougher because they would most likely have to play the Clippers.
right, and having all this time off is definitely going to help for Kawhi and Paul George.
Well, that's the thing. You don't really know if they. Here's what's intriguing about this is to me, you have a layoff. Clearly, they're going to have some sort of preseason-ish games, right? And let's assume they go just into a playoff format. You're then trying to assume that everybody's going to play at the level they were. Nobody knows how this is going to affect teams moving forward in an empty arena, no less. So I think just for that, there's a lot of intrigue, especially if they did it this way. And I think you probably see some ridiculous surprises just based on seeding. You're not like I don't think the Magic aren't going to be Milwaukee, but I think you would probably see some upsets that maybe don't typically happen in the NBA playoffs. It's kind of chalk for the most part, most years. But I think you would see some potentially serious, interesting outcomes because of the layoff, because of the just playing in a 5,000 seat Disney empty basketball arena.
Couldn't they just like pump in crowd noise too? Like you would think, like for the home team or something, you find some way to do that so it's not just playing with no sound. Or
I mean, I like when do you pump it in though? Like I like that just seems stupid to me. Like just play it in at that point.
Yeah, I think people have been talking about if it's long enough layoff that maybe Kyrie and Durant could come back, but I don't think that you're off for that long and you come back and you're just Kyrie and Durant again. It would take much more.
No, but that would be you want to add some intrigue to things.
Have them playing the Lakers, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, then it gets really interesting just because you go, okay, well, you still favor the Lakers, but like that would make that matchup really interesting for sure.
Yeah, you'd still favor the Lakers. I mean, you'd be seeing Durant and Kyrie against Anthony Davis and LeBron. I mean, I would watch that more than I would a regular.
Well, undoubtedly, there are some like here's what's another interesting point is does the layoff help like really like the Lakers are old as dirt, right? In reality, outside of Anthony Davis and Kuzma, like they're really old. Does that help or hurt their veterans? I don't know the answer to that. Like, I mean, does it help or hurt? Some of these teams were nicked up. I mean, the Clippers, were a little bit beat up. You had the Jazz who were missing a couple good players. So it's going to be interesting to see if everybody comes back with a healthy roster, how much of a difference that made and how much how much rust is there? Because if you're going right into the playoffs, you don't you better be on your game immediately.
Yeah, I think that's an advantage for the Lakers too, because if you're going to trust anybody to stay in shape during a layoff, it would be probably LeBron, right? Like, he's going to be.
Yeah, I agree, but that doesn't carry you to a championship either. If the rest of the guys, let's say the role players aren't, come back really rusty because they're just older, um, you know, it would it'll be interesting. It's going to be really interesting once they decide the format. I will be really intrigued, especially since this seems to be the direction of most of the conversations.
Well, I've heard too that maybe they don't go right into the playoffs. Maybe they have like a couple of games because they have to play a certain number of games to get the TV money. So I think if they are coming back, they're going to at least play the games to get that money. Like that's one thing for sure.
That's true. So you're assuming that they're gonna, before they hit the playoffs, they're not just walking right into the playoffs. That they're.
I don't think so, especially because I think Lillard said something about.
Yeah. He's not playing if there's not a realistic chance for them to make the playoffs.
Yeah, because they're right outside of it. So.
Well, they're 3.5 games back. So I mean, you need at least 15 games to make up that difference.
And I think most of the teams we need like 8 more games to get to the 70 game mark where they get the money.
Okay.
So I think they could play 8 games each, and I don't know how it would work with the seeding and everything because you're not going to have like the Pistons come back or teams that are just like so out of it. Like, what's the point of even bringing more people there and having them come in?
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that's pretty much it. NBA might come back. One league that's back for sure is Bundesliga, though. That actually was a pretty good. Bundesliga match. I've been doing some betting on that. So that was. But yeah, I think we went pretty long there. I think we got shit to do anyways.
Hockey.
Yeah, well, we didn't talk about hockey, I guess, but yeah, they were talking about coming back too. Same thing with the Red Wings still.
Right, it's shortened season into the playoffs, right? So.
Yeah, they were talking about adding a couple of like teams that were just outside of it. They were going to add it'll be 24 teams total. So I mean, those teams can't complain about a chance of not getting in. They just have. They just have 1 game play-ins to see if you get into the playoffs, I guess.
Yeah, and I haven't heard a lot about baseball. I haven't recently. I don't really know what baseball's doing yet.
Well, that's a whole different thing. But
it would seem like that would be the easiest one to bring back immediately.
Well, it's about money now. Now they're.
No, I don't know that. I know, but the longer they delay this, the more money you're talking about having to cut back on. Let's get this thing going. And admittedly, I'm saying this as a Dodgers fan who doesn't want to see our trade for Mookie Betts go by the wayside.
Well, that would be an interesting thing too. Is I don't think they're going to wind up canceling the whole season. But if they did, does that count as a year of service? Do the Dodgers just not have Mookie Betts now for what the trade was?
Well,
or
I was talking to Tony about this because he's a Dodgers fan, and one of the interesting dynamics would be, let's say that happened or a really shortened season. The Dodgers are going to be there's not going to be a bunch of teams lining up to pay $40 million for a player, right? So in reality, I think it still puts the Dodgers in the best position to sign him or big free agents because some of these quote unquote smaller market teams, they're absolutely taking a hit. They're going to have to cut some corners where they can. So I don't think there's going to be a bunch of teams lining up to sign $35 million a year, $40 million players like Mookie Betts, as good as he is. So there's a part of it that I think us as Dodgers fans still feel okay about because they obviously have a massive TV deal that the Dodgers could sign whoever they want in reality. Mm-hmm. But so I don't think there's going to be a huge market for these $35, $40 million players.
Yeah, it'll be. I wish it's just that right now they're arguing about money, but if it's the owners, because what they're arguing about pretty much is there's going to be half the games, but they can't pay half the money because they're not going to have half the revenue or something like that.
Yeah.
But then they're saying, so say if a player makes 10 million, then he would now make 2.9 million. And I can understand why some players might not want to come back to make a third of the money. I mean, it's better than making none of the money, but the owners can also just like pay these players. Like, it's not like they can't afford it. You've seen other employers step up and like help their employees.
Right, but they don't have revenue sharing in the same way that the NBA and the NFL does, and it's why there is still is a difference in, you know, the Pirates, you know, the Marlins, Tampa, like, you know, heck, Detroit. Like, I mean, are yeah, it matters to them, and I'm not siding with the owners, but I do think the players have to be realistic. Are you saying make no money is better than making half of your salary? I don't know. And I don't know how much they share the financial part of it with their unions, where they're going, hey, here's the books, here's what the revenue is going to be, here's why we're asking you to take that. I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that. Maybe they do, but it's like any other business. And yes, the owners in reality have deep pockets, but like, are depending on where their money is coming from, they could be taking a massive hit as well because of everything that's going on. I don't think it's fair to just say, oh, well, they have plenty of money to just play these guys whether they pay or not.
No, but my issue is that when the TV deals go up and the revenues go up, then the players don't get more money. They have to honor the contracts that they signed previously. So now, because their owners' revenue is going down and they have these contracts with these players.
But that works that way with everything in business. If I go in managing a restaurant and we increase our revenues after I get there significantly, I may get a 3% at the end of the year raise, but I don't get part of the profits. Like, and if I signed a contract for that amount, which you're not, like, what is, I don't understand the argument that, well, they own the business. They're your bosses, just like we all have bosses.
The only argument for me is, like, if they're going to play half the games, pay them half the money.
I'm with you there.
And that's what the whole argument is. They want to pay them like a third of the money. And they know that everybody in the public, for the most part, is going to side with the owners for some weird.
Baseball fan revenue, though, is a big deal for them because of the amount of games they play. So there is an argument from the owners to be made there. It's just not pocket change because of the fact that they have that many home games, even if, you know, it's half full most of the time. Like, that is a massive amount of money. So it's not as simple as just saying you played half the games and that's it. Like, there's an element of it without fans that drastically impacts the financial well-being of those teams.
Yeah, I mean, I understand all that about the business part and everything like that, but just you're able to come back at this point, and now you're gonna try to make the players to be the bad guys in the media for wanting pretty much what the contract is for their money.
I think it would be fine if players didn't come out with these outrageous statements that make them, like, that's the thing about the owners. They're smart about it, and you don't see them getting into, like, having these outrageous statements that do make them look bad and say, I'm not playing for $6 million this year for, you know, playing 90 games for $6 million. Okay. Like, yeah. You're gonna have a hard time getting sympathy from even fans who side with players. Like, honestly, when you have to still understand as a player how to. There's a PR part of this.
Yeah, and they're not doing a good job so far.
They're not. And if I was their rep, I'd be like, hey, I'd be sending out an email saying, how about none of you comment on this other than these general comments? You know, we're hoping to get back to the season. We understand there's financial ramifications due to, you know, the pandemic. We're hoping we can get on the same side as ownership and get the season started. Right? What is so effing hard about that?
No, yeah, and
that up, you know, like, really, like, yeah, you don't go off and say, you know, screw you, I'm not playing for that little money. Like, when you say that, you put yourself in a bad position, whether you have a valid argument or not.
They are the ones taking the risk by going back and playing and everything like that. The owners aren't really taking any risks for having the players come back and play So I understand that if they want to come back and make the same money when they're taking a more amount of a risk, I can understand that. Because like some
But
of
if
the
you
players,
get to a point where you cancel and you don't make money, then how is that a win?
I think that right now they're just kind of in a negotiating situation where the owners are going to put out the worst offer first and then kind of move up from there. You know, like you were saying about business, you never put out the offer that you think they're going to take first. You want to lowball it so that when they do come back, they feel like they're winning. Like these guys, whether some of them were born into it, a lot of them are good at business, and they always have the advantage. Like the players need to play to make the money. The owners, they don't want it, but they can withstand more time off, and that's why strikes never work for like football or anything like that, because these players can't afford. And you're talking about guys too who have, and I know we're getting into a point where nobody cares if guys make millions or hundreds of thousands, but if you have certain bills and stuff, and you know, like for you, you're planning on having a certain salary, and then now it's cut by 70%. Like not every player is making 10 million a year. What if there's a guy that's making like 500,000 and now they're telling him he's only going to make 200,000 or 100,000?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with your point, and I think that's kind of what every league, every business is dealing with. There's like layers to this that on the surface seem obvious, and then you realize the dynamics of business and different industries and the sports industries, even by league, are so drastically different. The economics of it, again, baseball makes much more revenue off of their fans. And then you have a handful that have these massive TV contracts. The NFL just kind of splits it all, so it's a little bit different, and that doesn't even get into the college sports, which is a whole other animal to try and dissect. There's a lot of things that are going to come up, and maybe they're just going to figure it out as they go. But undoubtedly, there's going to be some things that we're going to go, oh crap, like.
Yeah, it was funny when some of the presidents came out and said, if students can't return to classes, then we're not coming back to play football. It's like, yeah, no shit, because then it would be professional football, which we all already know it is, but you can't make it look like that because of how it looks. Like, okay, we can't have classes, but you guys come back and play and make millions of dollars for the schools that fund everything else, and you're coming.
Right, but there's a lot of schools that are going to have to ask coaches to take pay cuts. There's going to be a lot of cutting of finances across the NCAA. Some of these schools, as far as travel goes, I mean, most every school makes a good amount of their money each year off of football, right? And especially the big schools off of filling 70, 80,000 seat stadiums. I don't know. And then you're going to have to cut, if you start cutting programs, you have to cut a men's and women's program. And I think that's going to happen as well. I think coaches are going to be asked to take pay cuts. I think you're going to see all sorts of different things, and none of it is going to be specific to, across the board, because each school's financial situation is completely different, so it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out.
All right, my laptop's gonna die, and I gotta eat dinner, and I have to pee.
All right.
I'll talk to you guys. Good talking to you.
Yeah, likewise.